This story begins with our protagonist who is a little tired after finishing work in the field. Then a man comes up to him, thanks him, and tells him that he has done enough for them, that he can go to rest and accept the money as a reward, but the boy refuses to say that he cannot accept that money because his philosophy is not to charge for good work. And we see the surrounding people saying that they wish there were more guys like him, and we see the protagonist who is very happy as he has completed the mission of collecting good reputation points. The protagonist makes a brief explanation about this game. He says that the name of this game is a divine catastrophe and that it has been a week since its launch, but only in a few days already reached the goal of 1 billion of players, as the game is very famous for its very realistic graphics and also has many types of professions, which are adventurer, wizard, and knights. These were key to the success of this game, and that shows us the statistics of the protagonist, which is called Wildfire and is currently at level 1 and has no profession, and his reputation is 9, and we see the protagonist saying that for the change of profession, you need 10 points of player reputation and I only need 1 more point and can become a holy knight. After that we see the protagonist who is walking calmly. He meets an old man who asks him for help. The protagonist quickly approaches asking the old man what he needs. The old man answers that he needs help, but he doesn't know if he is the right one, and the protagonist answers him not to worry, that he can complete any mission, and the old man tells him that he needs that someone takes the ring to the city, and the protagonist says in his mind that the city is very close and that the mission will be very easy, and that the old man throws the ring to the protagonist. However, when he tries to catch the ring, his body begins to change so much so that it seems another person, and the protagonist realizes that the old man has disappeared, and in the system appears saying that he has had the profession of a tyrant and what time has a reputation of minus 100 points, something that leaves the protagonist bad. In that the old man appears and tells him that since he joined the tyrants they are on the same side and that now he can give him some advice. However, the protagonist, very angry, tells him to shut up and that he had no problem with him, and that because he did that, the old man replies that he told him that he could complete any mission and that he does not know why he is angry. The protagonist, with tears in his eyes, tells him that he did missions to get a good conduct point and be able to become a holy knight, but because of him he lost everything. The old man answers him that this is his chance and that in the future he will learn the true strength of a tyrant, and the protagonist, with a bad face or with a face of not convinced, asks him if the old man is serious. The protagonist in his mind thought that his reputation dropped from 9 to minus 100, and the old man interrupts him, telling him that many of his powers are restricted but that he will leave him a gift by leaving the place. The protagonist checks the system to see what skills his tyrant profession has, but it shows nothing, and the protagonist leaves the place saying that the old man tricked him and that he will return to the city to see if there is a way to change his profession. After that we see the protagonist, which is returned to the city, and when he arrives he says that in the game, there will be a war where players can get great rewards, achievements, and a lot of reputation, and they will take advantage of this event to reverse their minus 100 reputation. When he is about to enter the city, a guard tells him to stop or else he will be attacked, and the protagonist stops and asks him if they are talking about him and not to worry, that he is not a bad person, but a large number of guards begin to chase him, and the protagonist says it's all the fault of that old man and that the system appears which asks him if he wants to activate the ability of the villain, and he is not. The protagonist falls and subsequently ends up surrounded by all the guards, so without more options decide to activate the ability. We see that a strange light begins to come out of his arm, and at that moment a knight attacks him. However, this quickly ends up making him a big cut and defeating, and that appears the system which says that for having attacked a guard of the city his sympathy has lowered, and also has been placed a bounty on his head in the city of 10 gold coins, and the protagonist tries to apologize to the guards. However, these quickly attack him, but the protagonist easily dodges them. However, in that appears the captain of the knights, quickly attacks the protagonist, and he thinks he is lost, but he feels that he did not do any damage. Something that leaves him very surprised, and he changes his expression saying that it is his turn, and quickly with a series of movements begins to defeat the guards while apologizing in the process. After a while he ends up defeating them. The protagonist reviews his status saying that as he suspected, his ability increases according to the reputation. The lower his reputation, the higher the increase in attributes, and the protagonist says that because of this ability he will not be able to enter the city, so he will have to go to another city of chaos, but first he will check the guards to see if they have anything of value. After that we see a few subjects arrive where the protagonist had fought, and the leader asks what happened in this place. One of his subordinates tells him that it was an adventurer who defeated them all. The leader asks if there is such an adventurer, but it does not matter, and he shouts to his subordinates that he will put a bounty on his head of 200 gold coins and that he wants him dead or alive. After that we see the protagonist who goes to the city of chaos, and in that appears the system in which tells him that they have put a bounty of 200 gold coins on his head. He says that he wanted to change his job from Knight Templar to Knight Sacros, however he ended up being a tyrant. With 300 reputations, he can't even enter the main city, but the only good thing is the villain skill, which lasts a few minutes but has a cooldown of almost an hour, and the main character says that this game is very realistic even though he is very hungry, and that he meets a person and says that maybe he can find food and water in that small village, and when he tries to ask him about it, he tells him that he can't go to the main city. And when he tries to ask the guy something, he leaves, and the protagonist says that he needs to find a way to recover from the world, that this can't go on like this. After that, we see the protagonist who is in the village, however he is surrounded and the people tell him not to go near, and the protagonist replies that they have misjudged him, that he doesn't want to hurt anyone. However, the people run out of the place. After that, we see the protagonist, which is walking around the village, and this one says that if he finds me food he will starve to death, and that this one finds food since villagers left the place because of the protagonist, and this one wonders if it is okay to take his food, but he ends up eating the villagers' food since he can't stand the hunger. At that, the system seems to tell him that he is stealing food from the villagers, and because of that he gets -1 reputation and -10 silver coins. After the protagonist finished eating, he planned to leave the place, but he decided to change his outfit and ends up stealing some clothes, and again the system seems to tell him that he has stolen another item and his stats increased. After the protagonist left the place, we see the villagers who are checking if he has not stolen them only have stolen some clothes and food, and that one of the villagers finds a letter that had left the protagonist, which says, "I was very hungry and thirsty, sorry for taking a little of your stuff, then I'll come back and pay you." From that, we see the protagonist who after a while manages to reach the City of Chaos. He is surprised because no one recognizes him, but then does not give it importance and decides to go to a small hut in the city, and the owner asks the protagonist that he wants, and he answers that he wants 20 rations of milk and 20 rations of bread, that he only wants food and that it is for a long trip. The owner of the place answers him that this place is not for children and that the only thing he can offer him is beer, and we see that all the people in the place start to laugh at the protagonist, but he just ignores him and answers the owner the place that he does not want beer, and the owner of the place answers him that he respects his decision but that things are very expensive here. The protagonist replies that he killed some wild monsters on the way here and that he now has 50 silver coins if there is not something on the menu that he can buy at that price, and the owner replies that for 20 servings of milk and 20 servings of bread, the total would be 4 gold coins and that you can pay. The protagonist goes to the mission table as he is already on his way to the mission table. The protagonist goes to the mission table since apparently this tavern is like a guild in which he can do missions for great rewards. Well, after this brief explanation, the lord of the tavern tells the protagonist that this is not a place where he can be and that the best thing is that he should go home, and we see the person from home saying that the protagonist must be very scared to realize that all the quests are of very powerful monsters that he will have to face. The protagonist chooses a quest and the tavern lord tells him where he can collect the reward after completing it, and the tavern lord asks him if you are sure they want to kill a beast called Kasky, the treasury. That all the people hearing this begin to laugh at the protagonist, saying that if he is crazy. The lord of the tavern tells the protagonist that he can earn a lot of money if he completes this mission. However, I remind him that this beast is the most powerful in the place. The protagonist says that he understands, but to wait for his return by leaving the place. Then we see the protagonist who is looking for the beast and he thinks he is lost, but the description of the mission said that the beast must be in that place, but he can't find it anywhere. The protagonist sits down to rest, complaining that having walked so much made him hungry and that this game is a little annoying because it feels very realistic, so he decides to eat a little and recover energy to continue looking for the beast. After the protagonist finishes eating, he decides to leave the place, but at that moment he feels a strong tremor and quickly gets on guard, wondering if it is a beast, but he cannot see any. Suddenly a screamer opens and a small beast comes out, leaving the protagonist very disappointed, but the small beast ends up becoming a monster that the protagonist was looking for, and he prepares himself by saying that if the monster is a beast he will be able to see it. The monster quickly attacks the protagonist, but he dodges it and then attacks the monster. However, the protagonist realizes that the attack did not do any damage, and the monster took advantage of the moment and attacked the protagonist, smashing him to the ground. However, the protagonist gets up as if nothing happened and quickly attacks him with a series of movements and ends up ending his life. The system gives him the items of value at once, which are of epic quality and rare quality, something that left a little confused the protagonist. However, the system explains how the items are classified in the game, made up of a series of lower rank to the highest, which are ordinary, rare, epic, legendary, mythical. After this brief explanation, we see the protagonist who is reviewing his new item that he got from the monster, all level 25, and that when he entered the game was just level 13, which now show the statistics that all are above level. The protagonist decides to leave the place, so proceeds to take the corpse of the sea. However, for more than he tries, he cannot move the monster, so he gives up and decides to return to the tavern, and he tells the lord of the tavern, and Moto, the Monster West, is astonished. But the people say that he must be crazy or joking because a brat like him can't kill that monster, and one of the guys gets up and approaches him and says that most likely he must have been walking around all day, and then comes back and says that he killed the Kasky, but the protagonist just ignores him and asks the tavern master if he can claim his reward. Henry ends up walking away, and the man from the tavern tells him that he really killed the Kasky and where his body is, since Kasky meat is the tastiest in the world. But he won't pay if he doesn't have the body. The protagonist replied that if you don't know how big that thing is, I can't carry it, so he had to leave it out of the city. He has evidence. However, the lord of the tavern gets upset, telling him that enough is enough and how dare he play with it. That if he doesn't know what situation he is in, and you see people saying that the protagonist just pissed off the owner, that if perhaps he doesn't know who he is, that he is a guy who has a reward of 100 gold coins, and we see that the protagonist does not give him the importance, and the man of the tavern says that he has not done this for a long time, but he will have to teach him a lesson, and the protagonist tells him that he just told him that he killed the Kasky and that he is outside the city, and if he wants he can take him there to check the evidence, but nevertheless he has to pay him, and the man of the tavern laughs, and the protagonist tells him that he has just told him that he killed the Kasky and that he is outside the city and that he can take him there to check the evidence, but that nevertheless he has to pay him, and the man of the tavern laughs. The tavern lord laughs and asks him if he is threatening him, and quickly attacks the protagonist, and he dodges it, and the tavern lord tells him that he has a little speed that he won't be able to dodge his next blow, and the protagonist is with his sword, saying that it looks like he won't give him his reward until he teaches him a lesson, and without the tavern lord realizing it, he had taught him a lesson. He had given him a little cut and tells him that if he doesn't pay him he will send him to the hospital, and the people in the tavern say the same thing, and the tavern lord was not that strong. He says to shut up and leave the place and throws another blow, but he doesn't manage to do any damage, which leaves him very surprised because he used 30% of his strength and he can't do any trait, but he quickly charges all his energy against the protagonist and causes a big explosion, but this only lowers him 2% of life, and the protagonist says that enough of games and begins to hit the lord of the tavern with a series of attacks until he tells him that he will give him the money. After that, the protagonist is counting the money, and the tavern lord asks the protagonist if that is enough, but the protagonist tells him that there is still money left. He is very scared and runs to see if there is any money left, but he had already given him all the money, so the protagonist approaches him and reminds him that he had asked for it. So he quickly decides to go to look for it, and we see the local people who say that clearly the tavern owner is strong, but the protagonist is much stronger, and they hope he does not take revenge for what they said. Once the protagonist left, everyone was calm, but he returned to make him agree on the exact place where Kasky was. At that moment, a girl appears and asks what the problem is and why it is closed. The girl's name is Vicky, and she came to deliver the last bounty reports, and above all to tell them that there is a boy who looks weak but nevertheless has a reward of 203 gold coins for his head.